Welcome to another Maverick Workshop video, and in this video we're going to make blanks for a customer that wants a set of pens made for one of his friends. My wife is the blank maker of our operation, and we use Alumilite Clear Slow. And for Alumilite you need to do a 1-to-1 ratio of part A and part B. You can see that the resin is being measured on the scale, and the 1-to-1 ratio is referring to the weight of the resin and not necessarily the volume. Another important thing that I want to point out is that she's got a respirator on, and the reason is because once you mix part A and part B of the resin, there's a chemical reaction. It's pretty chilly out in the workshop, so we use a heat gun to warm up the resin after it's been poured and while mixing. And this helps along the chemical reaction, as well as gets the temperature up to a point where we put them into the individual cups before the pigments go in. I should go ahead and point out that there's a lot of different types of resin out there on the market, and the different ratios for volume that should be used is going to be on the bottle itself or bottles themselves. And for us, the open time for Alumilite Clear Slow is 12 minutes. And that is a good guide for when you're just beginning. But once you get to a certain point, it would become more advantageous for you to understand the different temperatures. There's a lot of different blank makers out there that have their own slight variations of the techniques to get the desired outcome. And the biggest suggestion I could make is follow the process that's on the bottle and then experiment, try different things until you achieve the effects that you're going for with the colors or color separation or whatever inclusions that you put into it. Just go for some repetitions and try to get it right as often as you can, and just understand that there is a cost to learn resin casting and blank making. If you decide to try it out, just remember to fail forward and try to learn from the last mistake that you made and continue to get better and better. Keeping the resin in a larger container allows for the chemical reaction also to go faster, because the more volume, the more chemical reaction, the more heat is generated. We've reached the temperature that we're going for, so the next step is to divide them into the individual cups and then get the pigment poured into them. And based on the color palette that the customer chose, we go with the blues and the greens, and then we'll fine tune as we get closer and mix everything in so we get the right colors that we're going for. In order to color match the blanks, we use some mica powder that will allow for us to have a better ability to match all the colors, as well as give it some shimmer at the same time. When you use mica powder, you want to make sure that you're thoroughly mixing in the mica powder, because it does sometimes like to clump up. For color matching resin, sometimes you'll find that you have to do a little color mixing in order to get just the right shade. So you'll see a few different mica powders being poured in, and just to get it the right shade that was asked for in the first place. So you just titrate until you get the outcome that you're going for. with the blue looking how it should, it's time to move on to the green. So we're starting with a pigment base, and then we're moving to put some yellow mica powder into that. Again, to give it that nice shimmer, as well as get the right shade of green. The green's looking pretty bright, but not quite bright enough. So adding a little bit of yellow pigment is going to brighten that up just a little bit more. The pigment and mica is thoroughly mixed in, and the colors are looking how they should. Here's a little color match of the palette that was chosen. You want to make sure that you continuously give it nice and good stirs to help distribute the heat, as well as keeping an eye on the temperature so you know when it's time to pour the resin into the molds. In addition to the open time that you have that's suggested for the resin that you're using, you also have the temperature gauge to see at what temperature you should be mixing them. And then another gauge that you can use is the viscosity. And you can see that she's picking up the sticks and then letting it just kind of run off of the mixing stick. And that's a way for her to determine the viscosity of the resin. When you are measuring the temperature, it's also important to point out that the top can be cooler than the middle of the cup as far as the resin there. So give it a quick stir and then check the temperature, and that'll give you the most accurate measure of what the temperature of each cup is. At this point, the resin is at an open time of about 12 minutes, and she is pouring them into the 2x2x4 mold. So the suggested open time is pretty accurate in this case. When you're pouring your resin into your mold, there's not an exact way to do it. Just do it how you think would be a cool way to layer them, and hopefully it turns out awesome. But you saw that she was switching back and forth from the green to the blue, just trying to get as much mix in there as you can. But you don't really want to stir it because that'll make the colors start running together. A pro tip is to always have another mold or cavity of some sort that you are going to use your resin for that you can put into the pot. That way you're not wasting as much resin, and then you end up with something just a little bit more than you expected. Before we began, we had the pressure pot hooked up to the air compressor and already set up with the lid open. And that way it's just a short travel from the workbench into the pressure pot. And then the lid goes right on. And when you're putting the lid onto a pressure pot, we found it to be most effective when you do opposing sides. Alumilite has suggested a minimum pressure of 35 psi, and this California Air Tool pressure pot has a maximum operating pressure of 60 psi. And for us, we go between 50 and 60. And that's what we have found to be most effective for us. Alumilite Clear Slow has a demold time of 2 to 4 hours, meaning that it needs to be under pressure for that period of time, and a full cure time of 5 to 7 days at room temperature. And with a quick clip, here we are ready to look at the blanks and get them all cut up and see what they look like inside.